All right, good afternoon. Welcome to Black Hat's Meet the Fed panel. What we've done is, because we have so many Feds this year, what we've had to do is break it up into two different panels for you. And what we're going to do is the first panel will be everybody except for the law enforcement guys. So what we're going to do, and then the law enforcement panel in about 35 minutes after you guys ask these folks questions, we'll flip-flop them and take your questions. So when we do get to the questions, if you please use the microphone so everybody can hear, that'll help expedite everything. So what we'll do is we'll start at my right, your left, and let everybody introduce themselves, do a real short bio, what their agency does and who they do it to it and why. So Rich.
Okay, Rich Marshall. I'm here as a private citizen. I'm not here as an official spokesperson to the agency. Anything I say is my personal opinion. It is not an official response to
Can you tell he's a lawyer?
Well, I have to say that so that I can continue making payments to my ex-wife and kids.
She's not getting my payments?
Actually, it's actually... You know, he was chasing me in his car the other day, and I stopped. I said, "What the hell are you doing this for?" And he said, "Well, why are you driving so fast from me?" And I said, "Well, you took my wife. I thought maybe you were going to give her back." No hard feelings between spouses. The reason Jim invites me to come to these panels is not just because of our deep and abiding friendship, but I think the more important reason is the fact that I was the legal architect behind Eligible Receiver 97. Now, most of you in this room, or at least 3/4 of you in this room, probably are too young to remember Eligible Receiver 97. But that was historically significant for a handful of reasons, not the least of which was the fact that it was the first time that information warfare was taken out of the laboratory and actually done against a live target and brought down a warfighting command. You can read about it quite a bit in the popular literature, but one of the key things that it did was to sensitize the leadership in our country and other countries as well, but particularly the United States, at the senior military leadership and the senior political leadership, that cyber warfare was a reality, that cybersecurity was not a theory, that vulnerability research was not just a mere academic exercise, but it had some real providence for our country and our business, and our way of life, our critical infrastructure. That led to President Clinton signing PDD 63, which set up a number of organizations, not the least of which was Dick Clark being the cyber czar. And I'm sure many of you heard his excellent presentation yesterday for the keynote speech. I was then drafted by Dick Clark, hard to say no to go down and be the principal deputy director of the President's Critical Infrastructure Assurance Office. I always get jobs with very long titles. If you're important, you have a short title, like king or queen or chairman or something. But it was in that group that we developed the national security cyber strategy that Dick talked so lovingly about yesterday. There's a lot that still needs to be done, and we collectively are dependent on you as in your research efforts to help make it better. Now, you've heard me say words, the administration, the nation's leaders, the nation's military, America, etc. But I want you to understand I'm an international perspective when it comes to that, and here's the reason for that. I'm going to make one reference to 9/11. Right after 9/11, I met with 5 of my counterparts from a number of English-speaking countries, and you can just tick them off: Great Britain, Canada, New Zealand, Australia, and the United States. Interestingly enough, I was hosting a dinner at a very nice restaurant down in Williamsburg, and a bit of irony there, because we had, as you may recall from earlier history, it had been involved in some little military activities against the United Kingdom, or Great Britain at the time. So I thought it was interesting to have a nice dinner in Williamsburg. And I was asking my colleagues, what Homeland Security meant to them, because right after 9/11, Homeland Security was a big issue. Still is, but I mean, it was really a tough issue to frame, both from a policy and a legal standpoint. And I asked my friend from New Zealand what his idea of Homeland Security was, and he gave the best definition, and I want to share that with you now, and that's what we're all about. He said, Richard, I have children that live in Australia, the United States, Canada, England, and I have a daughter in France who's made me a grandfather. Homeland Security is where my children are, and that's the view I would like us to take. Thank you.
Thanks, Rich. Ovi.
My name's Ovi Carroll. I was a special agent with the Air Force Office of Special Investigations working computer crime. Left that and became special agent of the Postal Inspector General's Office, of their computer crime unit. And I currently do a computer forensics, computer security, computer crime podcast called Cyberspeak, and we're trying to promote the free exchange of computer information and forensics information. We do things like we've interviewed FBI agents and tool makers, anything to help the computer crime and forensics community predominantly get the word out of new techniques, things that are going on in the forensics community. And I co-host that with a guy named Brett Padres.
My name is Keith Rhodes. I'm the Chief Technologist at the Government Accountability Office. You may have known it as the General Accounting Office. It's the GAO. Nicest thing that we're ever called is the investigative arm of Congress. I run the Center for Technology and Engineering, and in that there's the E-Security Laboratory. We test the security of the executive branch at the request of the legislative branch. It's a lot of fun. I guess a couple of points I would make is that the knowledge that's held in the defense side and the national security side as a result of things like eligible receiver has not been translated to the civil side. There has been no civilian eligible receiver. Likewise, there has been no private sector eligible receiver. The infrastructure, for lack of a better term, is owned by the private sector. I know a lot of you work for the private sector and a lot of you consult for the private sector. So what I would ask you to do is not be silent to your masters, those people who pay you. They are making you do stupid things. They are making you fix one spot in time. They're making you take care of and touch up a particular snapshot of their crappy security. What I'd like you to do is bite back. Explain to them, and I'm sure you have, but continue to do this, that it's not enough for you to continue to genetically alter yourself so you have 57 fingers in each hand so you can plug up the dike. I'd like you to explain to them what their responsibilities are. I do it from my side. It would be really nice if the people who understand what the systems are doing and not the mop heads who happen to own the companies can actually speak about it.
Kevin.
My name is Kevin Manson. I am a webaholic. You're supposed to say hi, Kevin.
Hi, Kevin.
Thank you.
Both hands on the table, please.
You know they have a site out there. It's called Webaholics Anonymous. I want you to think about that for a minute. That's a little like holding AA meetings in a bar. Okay, what do I do for a living? I train cyber cops. I'm credited with coining that term back in the late 80s. And my motto is red tape will not defeat terrorism. I'm having second thoughts about that. I'm beginning to think if we could get them to adopt some of the red tape that we have to deal with, we could easily defeat them. So what do? I'm a lawyer, but I want you to know my parents are married to each other.
Before or after?
I train cyber cops. I train law enforcement. I work at a place called the Federal Law Enforcement Training Center. We were one of the 23 agencies that was subsumed into Homeland Security. We used to be a part of the Treasury Department. We train 50,000 agents a year across the planet. We train with the Bureau. at the International Law Enforcement Academy in Hungary. We train in Botswana, or in Africa. We train in Thailand, in several places in the United States. And I talk to my students frequently, and I tell them that their technological reach is longer than their legal grasp. And one of the reasons I'm here is to really reach out to folks like you, because I've had people stop by Jim Christie's booth. By the way, I urge you to do that for the DoD booth out here. There's a great view there as well, I've been told. But I would urge you to stop by and talk to Jim. I've been there, and I've fielded a few questions from several of you, and you come up and said, what can we do to help you? And back in 2001, when Richard Clark was not able to make it because he had some other pressing duties as the keynote here, a good friend of mine, Bill Tafoya with the FBI, very dear friend, was called and asked if he would substitute for Richard Clark. Well, Bill called me and said, how'd you like to co-keynote at Black Hat? And I said, which small body parts do I need to give you to be able to do this? But one of the things we talked about during that keynote was to reach out to your community, the PDD 63 kind of thing, to shake hands with industry. And I was going to tell you, I'm the government, I'm here to help you. Well, no, that's not the right approach. I'm here to ask for your help. So I would urge you to do a couple things. One is if you want to reach out to help us in law enforcement, and the true elite are not those that are attacking. The true elite are people like you that are defending cyberspace. So if you want to help, there are a couple things you can do. Tune into Ovi's podcast, great resource, number one. Consider joining your local Electronic Crimes Task Force with the Secret Service. They're doing some wonderful work. They became, under the Patriot Act, they became the model for the nation for electronic crimes task forces. You might also consider joining a group called the CyberCop Portal. And a friend who used to be the head of security at DARPA, we shook hands 7 years ago, and we said we want to be able to have people like you be able to securely collaborate with us in law enforcement. So if you want to do that, if you go to www.cybercopportal.com, I'd appreciate it. Thanks. By the way, Jim, thanks again for inviting me.
That'd be $1.50.
Oh, and thank you, Ovi. I'd mentioned this to Ovi earlier. Also, would urge you to reach out to your local InfraGard chapter as well. And they will be joining us on the CyberCop portal here sometime in the next year. So we're talking about, we've got about 10,000 users on the portal now. We're going to add another 10,000 in the next year. Thanks, Jim.
Tony.
Thanks. Hi, I'm Tony Sager with the National Security Agency. Don't let the handmade sign fool you. I'm the Chief of Vulnerability Analysis and Operations, a group at NSA, and our focus is on finding vulnerability in the technology and in the operational space, primarily for the DoD and the intelligence community. So I've spent close to a 30-year career now at NSA as one of the vulnerability finders for the defense, you might say. And if you saw my talk the other day, I have sort of very basic, simple themes, and one of them is I view vulnerability finding, the kind of stuff that lots of you folks do, as a team sport. And number one, the quicker we learn to play together, the better off. And two, we have to remember the purpose of the sport is not to get better at the sport, it's to win the game. And so, this is about solving problems, and that's the focus I think the entire community needs. Thanks.
Hop.
Hi, I'm Bob Hopper. I'm with the National White Collar Crime Center. Our mandate, we're a congressionally funded nonprofit. Our mandate is to, at the state and local level, do what our partners at FLETC do, and that is teach state and local law enforcement computer forensics, fraud investigation, intelligence analysis at an advanced level. Matter of fact, did you send Ukraine to me because you didn't want to go to Ukraine? 'Cause I just got a phone call.
That's a fine
I'd like to hand that one back to you if I could. We do a little bit of training internationally, but did I mention we're non-profit, so we don't do a lot of that internationally, like our brothers from the federal government. But obviously, the federal government has an ability to teach a lot of folks because they've got funding. There are 100 times that many people that need to be trained at the state and local level. So often, those are the first people that touch the evidence, see the evidence, react to the evidence on any kind of incident response. State and local law enforcement, usually the guys that are there first, might get handed off, but if it isn't treated correctly and reacted to correctly on that initial touch, then shame on us. We are challenged, like everybody else, with changing technology, but thankfully, we've got a group of pretty smart guys that are on staff, and we have a habit of partnering with some pretty smart folks. For instance, at Purdue University, I've got one of my folks that is actually housed at Purdue and works there day to day, teaches a class during the school year at Purdue, and does work for us when he's not teaching. We've got a couple of projects we're working with Florida State University that is going to result in a tool that state and local law enforcement has been screaming for in the forensic community. So we try to get as much bang for the buck as we can and pinch that penny and get a mile of copper wire out of it, because we are a small agency. And I would echo, I don't know who said it, it may have been you. Come help us. State and local law enforcement sometimes is kind of a tough fraternity to get into. You may have to knock on their door more than once, but the effort would be worth it. Sitting in this room and the people at this conference today are some of the smartest people in the United States. And we can use that kind of help at the state and local level. There is somebody in every state in the United States doing computer forensics. And it may be an RCFL, a FBI-sponsored lab, but more likely it's probably a state or a small, medium-sized police department that's got a computer forensic unit. You can help those folks. It's a matter of you choosing to. And trust me, they can use the expertise. That's who we are.
And what's your background?
I'm an old cop. I've been a cop for, 37 years. I really am as old as I look.
Dr. Wells.
My name is Lynn Wells. I'm now at the National Defense University working on force transformation, which is nice because it gives me a chance to play in any sandbox I want to play in. Before that, I was the principal deputy in networks and information integration in the Pentagon for several years, and I was career Navy before that. A couple points to make is the DoD is really continuing to increase the emphasis on cybersecurity that's been going on for several years. In the past few months, they've announced a new Deputy Assistant Secretary for essentially network assurance and identity management. And the identity management is a very important part of this. We're also trying to shift the focus from just information assurance to mission assurance to make sure that the job can be accomplished whatever level of attack we're under. And then many of you may have seen the Air Force has actually stood up a new cyber command, which is promises to have some significant improvements as it gets going. The focus we're working on is moving from defense in depth to defense in breadth, particularly on cleared insider problems and anomalous behavior inside the network. The other piece that's a major focus right now is on globalization and how you can understand the threats at all levels of the supply chain, each stage of the supply chain, not just looking at current operations. And that's actually becoming a major focus for the U.S. interagency across the government. But one of the things I really need your help on is it's proved to be extraordinarily difficult to make the case in the budget environment for significantly increased funding for information assurance. Those of us who live in this field understand the importance of it, certainly you all do, but the folks who dole out the money actually want to see returns on investment, want to be able to have us come back and show how the money spent this year is going to produce the following results 3 or 4 years down the pike. And candidly, our community has not done a very good job in teeing up those sorts of metrics, making those kind of cases. So we welcome any sort of efforts from your perspective. Also, we're making concerted efforts in DoD to engage better outside the boundaries of the defense enterprise with our civil military partners, not just state and local responders, but also non-governmental organizations, private sector, and this is a good time to engage. The final thing I'd like to say is about career and public service. For those of you who are thinking about maybe changing jobs, something like 40% of the DoD acquisition workforce is going to be eligible for retirement in the next 5 to 10 years. There's going to be an enormous turnover at the senior levels of DoD, and that should provide some real opportunities for those of you who want to take a look at doing something really important that's part of history and something more than just yourself. So thank you very much for being here. Really appreciate what you do. Look forward to your questions.
I guess I ought to tell you who I am. I'm Jim Christie. I'm the Director of Futures Exploration for the Defense Cyber Crime Center. Defense Cyber Crime Center is a center of excellence for the Department of Defense, has three major components. We have the world's largest accredited digital forensics lab, has about 90 examiners. We have a Defense Computer Investigative Training Academy where we train both the criminal and the counterintelligence investigators in the Department of Defense on how to do digital forensics as well as cybercrime investigations. We have a Defense Cybercrime Institute, which does the research and development of tools, as well as, just as important, the testing and the validation of those tools so they can be used in an accredited forensics environment. My background, I was a special agent for 21 years doing cybercrime, 35 years with the government, retired, and so I'm looking for other opportunities. So, I'm a free agent now. So, anyway, at this point, what I'd like to do is, if we have microphones, I'd like to turn it over to you guys to ask this panel of questions. Remember that we have about 10 minutes, and then we're going to switch panels, and then we're going to bring up the law enforcement counterintelligence panel. So I think we have a question over here. If you wait for the microphone so everybody can hear, that would be great.
Yeah, I was just curious. Whoa. I was just curious if, from a information assurance perspective, from inside the Fed, you guys would support net neutrality.
Okay, we'll start with you, Rich. Lawyers have an answer and an opinion on everything. So,
You know, I said earlier that Jim and I were friends, and you notice that it's moved to past tense. No, he's still my good friend. I think it really depends on how you define net neutrality. I've listened very closely to the well-argued presentations on both sides, and I'm always convinced by the last one that I've heard. So the lobbyists are doing an extremely good job.
Was that a lawyer answer or what? that was a thing of beauty, Rich. Anybody else want to take a stab at that? Obviously not. Next question.
Is that you? To the gentleman from the GAO, you say you test the administration's systems and their security posture.
Yep.
Is your mandate extended to the Republican National Committee's email systems as well?
Rich, you're going to be a busy guy.
All right, who painted me the designated piñata?
Not so far. That's privately held and is not a government system. So when I didn't say the administrations, I said the executive branch. So that's the distinction. I'm sure if something got through the Supreme Court, if they wanted somebody to test it, they'd have to test executive privilege first, wouldn't they? I don't
Anybody
believe
from a corporation that did that?
anybody from a corporation.
I'm a member of the Electronic Crime Task Force in New York. And the one thing that we really need... Could you identify yourself? Oh, sorry. Eric Walburn, Information Survival. Okay. One of the things that I think we need is a better way or some sort of training course that teaches us how to handle cybercrime and evidence gathering, because those of us that are not forensic specialists need to know that information too, because we're often the first ones to come across this stuff.
I'll take that. We provide a course on it, just exactly that. Not only a course that you can come and take, but we do a train the trainer course. Where are you out of? New York? New York, yeah. Matter of fact, I think we've done one there. But if you'll get with me afterward, we can certainly make that train the trainer course available to your task force or whoever in that area.
I'm one of the private citizens. I'm one of the corporations that are members.
Well, if you're with the Electronic Crimes Task Force, we can make it available to you. But it's exactly what you're asking for. It's a course on how to identify electronic evidence, how to handle it.
Yeah, can you give him a microphone?
All we ever got, this was actually back when Bob Weaver ran the task force. Great guy.
He's my hero.
One of mine too.
Yeah.
And we got this pamphlet that would tell us how to handle it, but it really is kind of lacking in that we really don't know exactly how to, unplug the computer and say, okay, now give this to forensics, without damaging any evidence gathering.
Yeah, our course is exactly what you need. It's that first responder. I'm not a geek. I don't know what a mouse is, but here's a step-by-step process for seizure. Here's how to identify it. What's media. If you've never seen a thumb drive, we'll show you what a thumb drive looks like. That kind of really, really basic stuff that it's probably a one-day course. I think it's actually a 6-hour course. But get with me afterwards. That's right down our alley.
I think there are over 18,000 law enforcement agencies in the United States, and over 50% have 25 officers or less. And at the state and local level, I think their primary focus is putting fuel in patrol cars. And cybercrime and cybercrime investigations really hasn't moved to the top of their list. So as citizens of your counties and states, you should make your state representatives understand that the need for this kind of capability and the training that the National White Collar Crime Center provides. You guys have to tell these folks. Most lawyers that are state representatives are unlike Rich. They spell computer with a K. They have no idea, and so do most police chiefs. So I just pissed a bunch of them off, didn't I?
Let me quickly add to that. Our training is free to state and local law enforcement, so it doesn't cost them anything. The challenge for state and local law enforcement is to find the funding to get the equipment to do the work and the funding to travel to wherever we or anybody else is doing training. And some states get it, and some states really don't. And those that don't can be prodded along the way by their constituents. That's for sure. We've seen that happen time after time. But Jim makes a good point.
Kevin, did you have?
Well, I just mentioned if you're looking for resources.
Microphone.
Sorry. If you're looking for resources for training, Jim's right. I mean, we barely have enough to train the individuals we refer to as cyber cops. But for those of you in the industry, the way I've been able to reach out in some cases, and this is a limited number of individuals, albeit I bring people from industry in to teach some of my courses, intrusion, internet investigations at the Federal Law Enforcement Training Center. And if I would bring someone in as an instructor, I would invite them to stay for the entire course. We can't certify them, obviously, as law enforcement, but they were certainly welcome to attend the training. But I'll emphasize this again. Plug into your local Electronic Crimes Task Force with the Secret Service. Join High Tech Crime Investigators Association. And come to us on the CyberCop portal where you can collaborate with other people of the same ilk, people involved in protecting our nation's infrastructure. Our job is basically to help to drive this whole idea of the initiative from the White House to protect cyberspace. So you're going to be the first responders oftentimes to these things. So if you want to collaborate with law enforcement, hopefully I've given you a couple of places where you can do that.
Just as a side note, that was also one of the reasons why Brett Padres and I had started the Cyberspeak podcast, kind of an asynchronous way of getting information out there. And a lot of the things that we talk about is, while it's not official classes, there are a lot of incident responders, a lot of people in the computer security business that can't go to these classes or don't have the time to go to these classes. So once a week, for a little over a year and a half, we've been putting out shows, and some of the shows deal with just that type of thing. Okay, well, what are the best handling methods? What things do you need to be aware of? Why do you not want to just do certain things when you're responding to an incident? We've also brought in a lot of the people, the speakers that you hear here at Black Hat. I think we've had them on the podcast to interview them so they can talk a little bit more, and it's something that people can download and listen to. Again, we've even had tool writers come on and do step-by-steps on how to use their tools. So was just trying to help get the information out there.
One other thing that we're doing at the Defense Cybercrime Center is, with 90 examiners, you might find this hard to believe, but some of these guys are pretty geeky, and you can tell the extroverts from the introverts because when they walk down the hall, they'll look at your shoes. But they encounter a challenge, in a forensic exam. And we have some really smart guys that have been there 6, 7, 8 years, and they'll go out and research, solve that problem, they'll write it up, move on to the next case, not share how they did that with anyone. A month or two later, a brand new rookie's been out there for 3 or 4 months, gets the same challenge, researches it, doesn't solve it, doesn't ask anybody. And so what we had to do is we're building a knowledge base internally in our intranet to capture those tips and tricks. And so I got funded for a PhD Intel analyst and a senior digital forensic examiner. And these two guys, every time there's a new anomaly or a new challenge that an examiner encounters in an exam, their job is to research, figure out how to do this, and write it up and make it available in a knowledge base for everybody else. We thought that folks like yourselves ought to have access to this. So in collaboration with Oklahoma State University, we're building a national repository for digital forensics intel. So you're going to have to be law enforcement. We'll have a secure portal, and we're going to put this kind of information so that when you have a question, how do I do this? We're going to leverage the technology and make it available to you. So support us with a national repository by using it and by plugging stuff in. So the prototype ought to be ready by mid-August for several different law enforcement agencies. But it'll be open to federal, state, and local law enforcement as well as Canada, UK, Australia, and New Zealand.
Gentlemen, John Michael Brook with the Roosties Corporation, right over here. Dr. Wells, you mentioned earlier about return on investment. How do you quantify ROI with losses versus risk? Losses of somewhere on the order of $135 billion per hour just for Bank of America going down, or $3 trillion per day with the federal networks going down.
So how do you apply that to a defense environment? So how do you, you can make a whole series of risk management calculations in the financial sphere. My MasterCard, I'm willing to accept 3% losses on my credit cards, whatever that, I make that up in the billing charges. I don't know if anybody has gone to the top secret control officer lately and said it's okay to lose 3% of your documents every year. And so what we're trying to do basically is to set up a situation where you have network-centric operations, you have massive expansion of sharing of information, but we're trying to do it in essentially a zero-risk environment as the underpinning. And so we need that sort of to take the model and morph it from the private sector, where you have clear return on investment, clear risk gain, to a much less tangible situation involving lives and policies and effects of operations. And that's what's hard to do.
Let me add another little insight into ROI. ROI is not just return on investment. Thanks to Sarbanes-Oxley, also known as the Accountants Full Employment Act, there's also a thing called risk of indictment. And as the CEO and as a board member, you have a fiduciary obligation to the shareholders to make sure that your systems are adequately protected. If you don't, you just not only lose companies' assets, you also run the risk of losing your own personal assets and a deprivation of liberty. It's called jail.
But let me make one point. If I am defining what my target value is a clean opinion from an accounting firm, that's not real security. There are companies that have failed and failed miserably on the day they were awarded their clean opinion on their financial statement. So it has to be real. Somebody comes up and gets an A on a scorecard and I still get in. So that's why I made my point earlier relative to my NSA colleague that there has been no private sector eligible receiver. There has been no civilian government eligible receiver. And unless and until you can make it that real, then the numbers that you're throwing out there are nice, but it's just monopoly money. I mean, you have to show people real loss. I don't know how many of you were lucky enough to listen to Gotti speak in the earlier session in this room, but people lost things. I mean, they weren't able to get gas, they weren't able to get food. We were talking about milk and eggs and gasoline and bread in Estonia during the flood that was hitting them. He describes it as cyber warfare and a cyber riot. It could be a cyber invasion. You can use whatever term you want, but unless and until it's truly concrete, then how do you measure? You can take all the metrics you want, but they have to add up to a measurement at some point.
That's what I'm saying, is right now there's $3 trillion a day going on in financial transactions.
Well, there's $702 trillion every year just cleared relative to stock transactions. So, I mean, you know, you're talking about, this is a great target. I mean, that is a real plum out there if you're doing threat, vulnerability, impact equals risk. The threat's real, the vulnerability's real, and the target is real.
Risk is there, and that's what I'm getting at, is how do you go through and actually quantify some sort of ROI, which is what you brought up earlier, that you need that in order to make it.
So let's just take a note here. The infrastructure you're talking about is owned by the private sector by and large. It's certainly not owned by the Department of Defense. And so the arguments that we're trying to make are, what about the return on investments in the defense infrastructure? Because frankly, when we've gone to some of the private sector and said, hi, we're the feds, we're here to help, let's collaborate, we've not gotten welcomed with open arms. In addition, there are limits, both legal and fiscal, to how far DOD is going to be able to go out and actually work at defending the domestic infrastructure, not to mention the fact that it's really the province of the Department of Homeland Security. So I take the points you're making. I'm arguing those calculations are almost in a different sphere from what we are dealing with, where the particular point I made up on return on investment within the defense budget is how you convince the Army, Navy, Air Force to give up the fighter plane, tank, or ship in exchange for adding increased security to the network. And you just don't have the same kind of financial transaction calculus that you've raised in that type situation. Okay,
Appreciate all the questions. If we could have a round of applause for this panel, that would be great. Thanks, guys. Please grab the front row. Just grab the front row. Okay, I hope you're saving all the hard questions for the guys with the guns. Yep, only need 6. All right, Jim, we're gonna start with you.
Oh, great. My name is Jim Finch. I'm the Assistant Director of the Cyber Division for the FBI, and that pretty much makes me responsible for all cyber investigations in the United States done by the FBI. Hey, is Rocky out there? I ran into a guy this week, and he asked me about his company, and he said he would be here, and I told him I'd never heard of his company, and he couldn't believe it. I wanted to tell him, geez, I've been getting answers from people for 26 years, and the last thing I want to do is give them the impression I know a lot about them. I then get no answer. So, Rocky, I'm sorry I lied to you. I have heard of your company, but I wanted you to tell me about it. Now, I've been with the FBI for 26 years, and I probably have in excess of, or I know I have in excess of 550, 600 people working cyber-based crimes in the United States and overseas. Still don't have enough based on the internet. But I love the internet, folks. I've been building computers for 20 years. I was a gamer when gaming wasn't cool, and I still build gaming machines. And I'm always learning, and I'm pretty excited to be here. As a matter of fact, this is probably the first time an assistant director has shown up at Black Hat or DEF CON, and you probably won't see it after me. However, I'm hoping more computer-savvy people will follow me. My director, for whatever reason, at some point in time decided he wanted someone running the cyber division who had a technical background. So I was plucked from my cozy job elsewhere in the country and brought back to Washington, D.C. to do what I consider is an honorable thing and investigate the crimes on the internet. And let me tell you, I see some things that I can't believe. But I tell people I liken the internet to one of those safe neighborhoods or one of those neighborhoods where it's pretty during the day and then at night it becomes a dangerous place. Well, the internet's like that, but it's a dangerous place all the time. And it's pretty all the time. I spend more time on the internet. As a matter of fact, I used to take time off, and my wife would tease me for taking time off to spend quality time with my computer. But that's just how I feel about technology. I'm constantly learning, and being here with you, the folks who are actually on the front lines in the private sector trying to secure a network that wasn't based on security. So you have one heck of a task in front of you. But for those who are using the internet for something other than legal means or legal reasons, I, and hopefully my approximately 600 agents looking at cyber crimes, will respond to those illegal actions accordingly. As a matter of fact, I have some people over in Romania in a task force because I was seeing so much crime coming from Eastern Europe that I had to put boots on the ground in Eastern Europe to address that. So we're working at it, but let me tell you, it's not an easy job, and it's not going to get any easier because our talent out there has matured. The talent that has the malicious intent has matured, and they're getting better. And I'm seeing exploits that I've never thought were possible. So I would love your help. I think the entire federal government would love your help. But you folks have a monumental task just keeping the network secure in your company. So if you can't provide your help, I sort of understand it. You're busy. But when we come to your company to talk with you about some of the exploits that take place, I hope you will be cooperative and understand. My folks are just trying to make the internet a safer place if that's possible. Thank you.
Thanks, Jim. Tim?
My name is Tim Kasiba. I've been with the FBI for about 12 years now, just under 12 years. I'm currently running a forensics lab in Linthicum, formerly in Jim's building. We just moved out to our new facility July 1st. Prior to that, I worked for NCIS, so I've been doing this for about 18 years. It's a distinct pleasure to be up here with these gentlemen. This is my first year. As Mr. Finch said, it's not generally been widely accepted, the Bureau letting us come to facilities like this or arrangements like this, but that's changing, and we're glad. It's certainly a pleasure, and I've traveled overseas with Mr. Finch as well, and it's a distinct pleasure to be able to do that and be able to talk to folks like you. This is an excellent opportunity for us. We've had some excellent discourse with people offline, and that's been extremely helpful. Contrary to what you see in the press, we are occasionally winning. We do win. I liken it to my wife, who's deathly afraid to fly, and you know, that one airplane she's going to get on is going to be the one that's going to crash today. But I remind her about the tens of thousands that take off and land every day, and those are the ones that you're never going to see in the press. We do win. There's a number of incidences which you will never ever read about. So there is hope, and we still continue to have hope, and we still continue to try, and that's where our motivation comes from. Kevin mentioned earlier about training. The InfoGuard contacts out there are excellent. I encourage you to get involved. People have come up to us and asked us, how can we help you? And we encourage you to get involved in those organizations because we could really use your help. Again, I'd be happy to answer questions about evidence handling and the InfoGuard. We go out and talk to the InfoGuard meetings to talk about that. But generally, a lot of people generally know what they're doing. They got a really good handle on it. But to answer the gentleman's question earlier, if you could just lock it up and start a chain of custody, that would really wrap it in a nice bow. And we'd really like to see that if we show up in a search warrant. Thanks very much.
We have, thanks, Tim. We had the privilege of having a representation from the Royal Canadian Mounted Police again this year. They didn't make it last year, but were with us on the Meet Fed the year before. So it is an international panel. Al.
Thanks, Jim. Well, good afternoon. Al Langell from the Royal Canadian Mounted Police. As terms of reference, Royal Canadian Mounted Police is the federal police force in Canada. We are responsible for most of the federal legislation throughout the country. We're also the provincial police force of choice in 8 of our 10 provinces, and the police force in hundreds of municipalities across the country. So in essence, one advantage that we have is that we have touch points right across the country in all the different areas. I'm a 31-year veteran of the Royal Canadian Mounted Police. I'm in the Technological Crime Program of the RCMP. The Technological Crime Program is centered out of Ottawa with technological crime units in each of our provinces. The program Technological Crime Branch in Ottawa is responsible for our program management, also research and development, development of tools. It is important to be here today. Jim was saying earlier, I'm the international flavor to the panel. It is so without the international cooperation that we enjoy within law enforcement, we would not be able to do the jobs that we have to do today. Pleasure sitting here with the FBI. I had the opportunity to go to their headquarters in September, but that brought home the cooperation that we need, and in fact the cooperation that works. My particular unit is a tech crime unit. I head up a tech crime unit for Atlantic Canada, the 4 Atlantic provinces. I have 13 employees. Our employees are a mix of sworn regular members and civilian members of the RCMP. We have a mandate to investigate cyber threats to Canada's critical infrastructure. We have a mandate to assist in Canada's national security with cyber threats. We have a primary mandate of tech crime units is the investigation of crimes against computer systems. And our secondary mandate is assistance to detachments and units on traditional crime committed using computer systems. Unfortunately, about 80% of our work is the criminal code type work, the crimes that are traditional. And the unfortunate part of that is about 80% of that work is child pornography. Some of our biggest challenges then is not so much anymore the resources. We have been the last few years have seen tremendous growth in our function. Some of our challenges are because of the international boundaries, the release of information. In Canada, it's not difficult for me to get information from companies because I can swear a search warrant and execute the search warrant and get the information legally. One of our challenges when we go to other countries is utilizing the Mutual Legal Assistance Treaty request and the delays that builds into it. 6 months to get IP information from a provider just doesn't work anymore. Those are some of the challenges that we deal with our international partners, and it's through our international partners that we're making advances in that area. Thank you.
Thanks, Al. Let me foot stomp the cooperation that agencies in the United States have with the RCMP. They share their research and development, their testing of tools with us. We have a terrific relationship with the RCMP. These guys are really top notch. Andy.
My name is Andrew Freed. I'm a senior special agent with the Treasury Department. I actually started out with the IRS, but we actually became a separate organization called TIGDA. Kind of sounds like the name of a toothpaste. But essentially, we do my group does the computer security for the IRS. I've been with Treasury for about 18 and a half years. I've known this rascal for probably 19 years. I wrote some of the original software that we use for analysis of computer crime way back when I was actually working out at the Kennedy Space Center. Most of the work we're doing right now deals with penetration testing of the IRS systems. We're very involved in some of the fraudulent schemes that are happening from overseas. And one of the, this is I believe my 7th or 8th DEF CON/Comdex that I've been to. So rather than talk a lot, I'll let them have time for questions.
Thanks, Andy. Barry.
Hi, my name is Barry Grundy. I'm a special agent with the NASA Office of Inspector General Computer Crimes Division. A lot of people always say, whenever I introduce myself, is that what is NASA doing with federal agents? And most federal agencies have Inspector General's offices to oversee and do both cyber missions and fraud, waste, and abuse. And I do computer crimes. I'm actually a supervisor for the computer crimes on the East Coast, about 7 NASA centers. And I always told people when I was at FLETC going through the course, people would say, what is NASA doing with federal agents? I always told people I was an air marshal for the space shuttle. But unfortunately, that's not really true. I'm not. But I'd like to get a flight. But generally what we do, a lot of traditional cyber cops do a lot of kiddie porn and what we consider classic forensics work. At NASA, the Computer Crimes Division is basically 70% intrusion investigations, and then we do a lot of support for fraud, waste, and abuse investigations. But the intrusion investigations is really where we focus, and that's where we do most of our work. And I'll leave it at that.
We all want to know about the recent reports on the astronauts, but we'll hit you with that later.
Lovely.
Okay. Tim.
Sure. My name is Tim Fowler. I'm a Marine Special Agent assigned to the Naval Criminal Investigative Service in Washington, D.C. I work for the Cyber Department. We have a cadre of about 70 personnel within the Cyber Department. Mainly we work in 3 different areas, counterintelligence, criminal investigations, and counterterrorism, both in investigations and operations and support. I've been assigned with them for the last 7 years, and that's pretty much it.
Did you have a TV show or something?
Oh, yes, but I'm going to talk about that.
Thanks, Tim. Okay, at this point, we're going to open it up to you guys for questions, so we need microphones. If you wait till a microphone gets there, and then...
I got 2 questions over here, and then I'll head to the other side of the room.
Okay. And then if you guys have answers to that, yell, and we'll get a microphone to you guys, too.
This one's regarding forensics. How many of you are using EnCase? There's been a lot of controversy lately over the validity of the tool.
Are you a member of the press?
Yes, she is.
Well, I'll talk for the RCP. The forensic process is much more than the use of one particular tool. The forensic process has to be very structured and targeted at the type of information we're using. One of our tools is EnCase. It's just one of several that we use. I was quite interested in the session I sat through yesterday afternoon when vulnerabilities with particular forensic tools were discussed. For some things that we're doing, it is a tool that provides us good information.
Anybody else want to take that?
I'll speak for the CAR program for the FBI. It is an approved tool. We actually maintain a list of standard operating procedures, otherwise known as SOPs, as well as a quality manual. And within that, the tools that we actually have tested and validated are subsequently approved, and typically are subsequently approved with what we call limitations. So you may be allowed to use a tool to do a forensic exam, but it's specifically within the parameters outlined in a list of limitations. So, and our card examiners are trained to those limitations and made aware of the deficiencies that may be part of a tool. So features, otherwise known as deficiencies.
At the Defense Computer Forensics Lab, we take a tool belt approach to things. So just like Tim and Al said, we test and validate all these tools so we know what the limitations are, where they work, where they don't work, and every tool probably has issues, if you will. So the use of a tool is not a big deal. Like my boss says on a regular basis, just because you use a scalpel, that doesn't make you a surgeon. Forensics is a process, a very, very structured process, and every tool, every piece of software probably has issues. Just need to know what those are. Anybody else?
Yeah, I think that there's an old saying in our industry that says if the only tool you know how to use is a hammer, everything looks like a nail. And I think what you're going to find is in a lot of the federal agencies, we use a number of tools. One tool that is used by a lot of the federal agencies is actually developed by IRS Criminal Investigation Division, of which we have a couple representatives here. Put your hands up. Come on. I saw that. The tool is called iLook, and actually I run a website where we distribute iLook worldwide. But you got to be careful about somebody reporting something doesn't work under certain conditions, because I don't think there's any tool that you can find that under some limitation it won't work. I think if you were to take your computer, put it underwater, you're going to find it doesn't work very well. Or if you take your hard drive and put it on top of a really big magnet, it's probably not going to work well. And I think most of the time the limitations that people will come up with may be limitations, but they may not be realistic or real-world limitations. But there are more tools than just EnCase, and I think in most organizations, including ours, you're going to find they use more than one.
Do you have a microphone?
I'd like to limit the comments so that we can get more questions in.
And there's supposed to be a press conference as well, so if the press could hold their questions for later, let the regular people have questions. Deborah.
Hi, my name is Don from ethicalhacker.net. We're an online magazine for security professionals. And we find in our discussion forums that the pen testers or ethical hackers are very active. And as mentioned before, it seems as though the forensic professionals tend to be a little introverted, to be nice. So I applaud your creation of the knowledge base, but how effective can it be when you mention that it's only available to law enforcement? And as I think we all agree here, most of us are the first responders, as has been mentioned a number of times. So do we take your recommendation and just pound on your door a few more times? So I guess the basic question is, what do we do to bridge the gap between the private and the public sector information sharing gap?
That's a really good question, and I think Oklahoma State University is looking at that. So there's going to be multiple versions of this. There's going to be a law enforcement version, because there's case-sensitive information that may be flowing on this, but some of that's going to be desensitized, and probably other portals to do the same thing. But you got to crawl before you can walk, and you got to walk before you can run, and it's a resource issue at this point. But absolutely agree with you.
You also made a comment about breaking into that fraternity, and maybe that's why we don't have a lot of sharing, because we feel like there's a wall between us and you.
Well, and the main issue with law enforcement is getting law enforcement to share with law enforcement. So, okay, I mean, you have 18,000 law enforcement agencies. I got to get those guys to share first, and once we make them comfortable and we start moving, transiting some of that data somewhere else, or maybe run in parallel. But there are issues with sharing and trust within the law enforcement community alone. So,
my name's Larry Bunch. I'm a contractor at Department of Energy and previously at DoD. And one of the issues I've run into, and I'd like to get your point of view, is information sharing between agencies. There's a lot of good information out there between agencies, but a lot of people are reluctant to share their information outside of the agency, and it really should be shared across the spectrum.
We currently have several MOUs with other organizations, all of which are law enforcement, of course, but we share with DOD, and likewise they share with us. We're actually pooling our resources to test and validate tools and document that to NIST standards, and subsequently share that within law enforcement. So I recognize your comment, and it's very valid, and we're doing our best to try and do that. There are equities that oftentimes, once the lawyers get involved, it gets very complicated, but we're working through that, and we're doing our best to share, I know, as much as we can.
I think if you notice all the agencies that we have represented on the panel, they're here because they share with one another, and that's, you know, crawl before you walk. I mean, in some of these issues, it's a culture within the agency, and you see those agencies' cultures changing today.
Jim, I'd like to mention that all the agencies represented here and a fair number of colleagues here in the audience as far as private industry are in fact represented on the CyberCop portal. That portal was intended to allow there to be a common place, common ground with relatively high security for sharing even up to and including law enforcement sensitive information. And just to give a little plug for the portal, 7 years ago, a fellow named Matt Donlan and I shook hands. Matt's former head of security at DARPA, the people who built the internet. And we built this thing so that we could do these kinds of tasks. So I'd urge those who are interested in wanting to collaborate with some of these very same people on this panel that you might want to consider signing up for the portal. Thanks.
And there are some good organizations. I heard somebody mention earlier, you know, some of it is sharing information, some of it is sharing intelligence. Obviously, the sharing of intelligence is much more difficult than the sharing of information. The HTCIA is a good organization for private industry to work with law enforcement to share a lot of best practices, to draw on your collective knowledge and to draw on our collective knowledge to help each other. And there are many organizations like that. Being a member of the HTCIA is why I bring that one up, but there are opportunities that way.
Yeah, one thing I'd like to also point out with communication is, in the government, I mean, just being realistic, buying a set of hard drives can be a nightmare, let alone communicating across agencies, things that are going on. And I think that process is getting better with things like the G1st portal and CyberCop and all these other things. But we can't take away the fact that person-to-person networking is really what does it best. And in law enforcement, we work to that in a number of working groups. DOJ's got some working groups. We're all in all different working groups where we try and work together on a number of issues. But there's InfraGard. There's a whole bunch of working groups that industry and corporations can get involved in as well, where you can interface with law enforcement. So I guess the point is, don't neglect. If you're looking for a government process to share stuff, good luck. I mean, they're out there, but they don't necessarily work perfectly, but they're getting better. Don't neglect the person-to-person networking. It's as important as anything else you can get involved in. Pick up the phone, make a call, go to a meeting. You know, there's resources out there.
And don't forget about InfraGard. I know it's been mentioned here, but there are over 20,000 members in InfraGard, and I know there's an agent representative in the city in which you live. We have 56 field offices and over 400 resident agency or satellite offices, and each agent in one of those offices is a conduit to InfraGard. And with the special interest groups on InfraGard, I'm sure you'll find something there that will interest you and be beneficial to you. It's where we share information. The members are vetted, and we share a lot of information. I personally look at the changes I personally look at every change that takes place on InfraGard, and I financially support that program, so I'm a firm believer in it, and the membership is growing. I just invested approximately $1.5 million to upgrade its infrastructure. So it's even more robust than it was previously, and I'm certain if you go to our InfraGard site, you'll find something there that will interest you and will allow you to share information with people of like interest.
Gentlemen, front row left.
There's been mention several times of the need to acquire the talent from the private sector, and those that are interested should pursue that. I have firsthand experience, at least in the defense contracting. I presume that's pervasive elsewhere, but are there any efforts underway to alleviate the issue where most hiring positions are looking to fill the position with a clearance and then teach the talent instead of getting someone with the skills already and get them the clearance?
I'd like to say one thing, that we have positions open, and it's very, very difficult for us to find somebody whose background is clear and who has the real expertise to walk into the job and do the work. We offer really long hours, very few days off, lots of training, but unfortunately not a lot of money. And most people, I think, that are of a fairly good caliber just would rather have a better job than something like what I have. And that's been a big problem. We have a serious shortage of talent in the federal government, of people that are real honest-to-goodness computer people. And you're right, a lot of the people we have, we've gotten agents and tried to teach them to be computer people. And I think what's happened and what we projected 5 or 10 years ago was that we really need to be taking computer people and teaching them to be agents, because there's a heck of a lot more education requirement to be a computer person than to be a cop. And it is a serious problem, but it's one that we're not creating. You guys are creating it by not wanting to basically do your part to serve your country. You want money. It's a silly thing. But we do have openings. We don't get people that advertise. And all these openings that we have are published on the OPM website. We just don't get people applying for them.
Just in DC3 alone, we've had a GS14 position, chief technologist, that has been open for 3.5 years, because I can't find anybody that wants to take a move to the Baltimore area and get half the house that they have wherever they're living today. So just
move it to Miami, and you have a lot more applicants.
I get asked this a lot, so I'll just throw this out. If you do get as far as taking a polygraph, please tell the truth, no matter how bad it is.
And I do it all the time in the FBI as far as training people. I spend more money on training. I'm a firm believer in training, and technology training isn't cheap. But I've explained to my director, this is the cost of doing business. So I take agents with no computer background in many cases, and I give them the training they need. If that means an MCSE certification, CCNA, fine. I do it. And I just can't get enough takers. So we're certainly looking for those aspiring to work computer intrusions, and you have to become an agent first. And then I'll train you. I'll make sure you receive the training.
Richard.
If you've got the skill set, there are two websites I would direct your attention to. One is DHS and the other one is NSA. They both have a system where you can submit your applications, your credentials, your resume, etc. You got the skill sets, you will attract their attention, and then the next hurdle is, of course, the security clearance. So it's not in reverse. It's skill set first is what we're very interested in. It's extremely difficult to bring somebody in off the street just because they can pass a polygraph and have a clean security clearance and teach them all of the technology that they need to have. And those in the civilian sector, not to use the trite phrase in the front lines, because I hate that, I mean, you're just there, you know a heck of a lot. And reverting back to a prior question, I didn't want to jump in on that earlier because I want to give everybody an opportunity to ask questions. The information sharing environment. PDD 63 set up a number of information sharing and analysis centers. One of the more effective, and I'm probably going to get into trouble for saying this, but I'm right.
Of course, because he's a lawyer.
The Financial Services Information Sharing and Analysis Center. You do not have to, as a matter of fact, they don't like you to be a Fed. Once in a while I get invited to sit in on their discussions, but everybody knows that I'm there. The rest of the time, they talk among and between themselves, and they build a bridge of trust. They're not these highly polished centers of academic excellence that don't talk to each other. They do share information, and most of them know each other by voice, and they do have a secure means of communication. The other PDD 63 sectors have similar information sharing and analysis centers, but not nearly as robust as the financial services.
Down the middle aisle there.
I manage one of the cybercrime response teams for one of the major banks in Australia. So we, to the Assistant Director's point, certainly see a lot of the growth in capability of the protagonists out of the former Soviet Socialist republics and so forth. The question I have is when you look at, say, the capability of the Rockfish Gang or similar groups, what and the political affiliations that they have and the protection that they have in the area they operate in, what's going to happen or can be done at a government level between governments to, I think, ultimately get ahead of these guys?
It certainly depends on which governments you're referring to. There are some countries or some governments we have better relationships with than others. And that particular exploit you're referring to, yeah, it emanates from a certain part of the world. And when it comes to the banking industry, my hope is that we shore up the banking system's security, network security, because I believe that will be a quicker solution than developing better relationships with certain countries when it comes to their local citizenry and what they're doing on our networks. But we're still trying, and believe it or not, we interface with those countries on a regular basis about network security and what's emanating from their countries. And we've made headway because their citizenry is not discriminate. They're hitting their own country as well as ours. And oftentimes we get cooperation just because they don't like what's happening to them. So I'm hoping, if for no other reason, they begin to work more with us because they are receiving just as much as we are when it comes to compromises on their networks.
Yeah, I'd like to add that, I think most federal agencies that deal with the public and revenue are seeing the same problems in the United States that you're seeing in Australia. Unfortunately, I'm way too intimately aware of some of the problems that we're experiencing with phishing sites and other fraud emanating out of Europe. And the bottom line is that, and I want to be blunt because I think that's really what Black Hat DEF CON's all about. Our effectiveness is kind of like standing on the beach, kicking waves, trying to change the tide. We're not effective. We're not making a difference. And I echo what the gentleman from the FBI said, that the solution is not trying to do an enforcement action because we're not able to do it effectively or even very often. I think that the better solution is we got to find the methods that they're using to gain their advantage and deal with that. And I would just say, information like implementing smart cards and better authentication with credit cards would mean they wouldn't want the credit cards. And that's really where we need to refocus our attention, because I'm not privy to everything the FBI does, but I know that in my neck of the woods, I have not been very successful working with overseas governments.
This is, I think we're out of time now, so.
Okay, thanks, guys.